Welcome to the Variety Streaming Room, and today's episode, TV Ads 2.0, How the Connected Age Gives TV Advertising a Second Life, presented by Mountain. I'm Cynthia Littleton, co-editor-in-chief of Variety. I'm looking forward to diving into a conversation about the state of television advertising, and more importantly, where it's going. And we have a terrific panel assembled of people who are in the trenches, in the business as it is changing by the day. Let's meet our panelists. Andrea Zapata, Executive Vice President of Ad Sales Research, Measurement, and Insights for Warner Brothers Discovery. Mark Douglas, President and CEO of Mountain. Dan Callahan, Senior VP of Data Strategy and Sales Innovation for Fox. Kristen O'Hara, Vice President of Agency and Brand Solutions for Google and YouTube. And John Lee, Chief Data Officer for Advertising and Partnerships at NBCUniversal. Let's start by jumping into a pool where everybody on this panel is involved with at this point, which is AVOD, or advertising supported video on demand. We love our acronyms in TV and advertising. How has the rise of AVOD channels, how has that changed the complexion of your media mixes? How does that change how you sell, how you market?
I don't sell or market, but I'll jump in from the buy side. We're very excited about all of the sort of AVOD services and market, including the recent announcements around Disney Plus and Netflix. We've seen traditional TV, the sort of aging of traditional TV, and we've seen Nielsen ratings decline year after year after year. And the reality is consumers are still engaged with premium video, just not only in linear environments. So more premium video supply and marketplace is good for marketers, if marketers that want to engage with audiences. And if that's where the audiences are, that's where GroupM and our clients will be.
I'll jump in, coming in from the publisher, the creator of the stories and the content that is indeed being consumed by audiences in the land of linear, but also now more than ever in the land of connected television and AVOD. Sitting at WBD, we reach 230 million freaking people every month, right? And they come to us in a variety of different ways for lots of different types of stories. And as the researcher on the panel here, I like to think about how is it that we're actually aggregating them. You said something very important earlier, a media mix. Mm-hmm. We can live in a land where we can reach lots of people in a short window of time, the way that God intended on television, right? And in a simultaneous fashion. But now we can actually start thinking about how do we start applying data, a consumer segment, and finding them in different pockets and different windows of whether they're viewing, obviously with HBO Max with ads or Discovery Plus, and anything and everything in between. Incrementality is the name of the game here. And I love a good Venn diagram, the only, and the both, right? And what we're learning, back to Matt's point earlier, is that the audiences are highly differentiated, no matter which environment they're in. And we have a responsibility to make sure their content is where they are. But really, when it comes to the research and the measurement side, it's what's the value? What's the right mix? How are you thinking about pulsing against them? What's the right frequency? What are the right ad formats? And ultimately, how receptive are they to your ad across all of these environments, right? But the audience has already dictated it. They're already there. They're telling us. It's now on us to make sure that we're meeting them in a really graceful and thoughtful way in the ad environment.
Mm-hmm. You raised some really interesting points about trackability. Feels to me like so much inventory has come on the market, and yet I sense no panic from anyone here. So I'm curious how the marketplace is absorbing all of these channels.
Well, it's going to create a market share war. I mean, there's no way around it.
Okay, now we got some war going on. Okay.
Right. The brand advertising market, the amount spent by brand advertisers is not growing, but the amount of inventory is growing substantially. So the only way around that is to bring more advertisers into the market. Because if we just focus on more inventory from the same advertisers, there are going to have to be winners and losers. When you go and talk to a large TV network, they have like 1,000 advertisers. They don't have 100,000 or 1 million like Meta has or Google has. So I think for Mountain, we're all about performance advertising, bringing new advertisers in the market. And I think whether, we're part of that solution or other companies, that has to happen. or it's going to be in a very exciting 2023. And they even where there's new inventory at some of the highest prices I think the industry has ever seen, but there's going to be a massive hangover in 2024 if there are not more companies coming into the market in 2023 to absorb that new inventory.
What, in your experience, is the tipping point that makes an advertiser that maybe had only been digital? What's the tipping point that takes them over into linear TV or streaming TV?
Yeah, as measurement. There's a set of companies that buy ads, and there's a set of companies that buy traffic to their brand. Like, you don't go to Google to buy an ad, right? You go to Google to buy traffic. And it comes in, it's like, oh, I have to create an ad to get the traffic. It's like a step along the journey. You have to cater to companies that are more interested in the traffic. They're traffic buyers or immediate buyers, so to say. And it's all about measurement for them. Like any amount of data that proves that spend is leading to a customer journey that arrives at their brand. And I think streaming provides that.
I find myself in this moment as a marketer among sellers and kind of thinking back to what got me into this business to begin with, which was always focusing on what's resonating with consumers right now. Why are they doing what they're doing? And, I come back in that moment to one of the things that's exciting is whether it's a brand that's focused on awareness, consideration, or performance, it still starts with what is going to resonate with consumers. And I'm thrilled that, we know that is YouTube. Nielsen just reported last week that YouTube surpassed Netflix as the largest streaming platform in watch time. And, for us, the angle from a YouTube perspective is very much all about creators and leaning into giving them a canvas to tell their unique stories.
Cynthia, I'm happy to wind it out. I mean, obviously 2.5
Please.
years ago, Fox made the bet to acquire Tubi. It was never a more exciting time to get into the AVOD space. I think Andrea's point is where our heads are at. It's a complement to our linear assets and still the great content we have, the sports rights we have, the audiences we drive from a linear basis, and now everything that we can do in the streaming AVOD landscape. It's an exciting time. Certainly there's fragmentation and there's business challenges that I do think measurement and a lot of things Mark and the others have mentioned will help iron out. But for us, it's really a great and exciting space that complements everything we do on the linear side of the house. And working with Matt and his clients to get there and get the measurement and insights they need is top of mind for us as well.
Well, I was just going to add and just build on a little bit of what Mark is saying. We work at NBCU with Mountain and Mark and his team. And so I agree on the measurement point, and I certainly think the inventory side of things is very disruptive. But just on the data end of things in general, I would say, now with CTV, we sort of have this convergence of great content, big audiences with this sort of desire for more precise data, right? More precise targeting, understanding those audiences. So a lot of those practices that those of us, who grew up in digital, we're accustomed to, that's a huge sort of opportunity, right? And focus here with CTV. And just to bring in another whole sort of angle here, I mean, with obviously the death of the third-party cookie, all these new state regulations, California's changing the regulations and so forth, first-party data plays a bigger and bigger role, right? And so I think CTV, and I'd love to see more colleagues and competitors or whatever you want to call them in the CTV industry come out with more and sort of bigger first-party data offerings from an identity and from a viewership and sort of content consumption perspective, because we don't really rely on cookies, right? Not to go into the weeds here, right? But we don't really rely on cookies, and we have direct relationships oftentimes with a logged in consumer, as if that reminds you of some other big players in the industry historically, right? And that creates an awesome, sort of targeting and measurement closed loop that doesn't require third-party cookies, actually doesn't require third-party data at all, right? So if you have lots and lots of first-party data on what people watch, right, and what they consume and the news they read and so forth, that's sort of like the new oil, right? In some ways, as you sort of all this sort of traditional ways of doing it in the programmatic landscape fall. I know Kristen would agree. I would think she would agree with this sort of statement, which is, look, if you're sitting on that data, now you have great content, short and long form, together with individual and household level data. We see that as like a huge step change. And, hopefully working with our agency partners like Matt and others, like that's, we see that as a big part of the conversation.
This business so much fun is like we've all sat on different sides of the table at different moments, right? So
It is exciting and there are opportunities. But the last thing we want at GroupM for our clients is a bunch of walled gardens. And instead of it being Google, Meta, and Amazon, it becomes Warner Brothers Discovery, NBC, Disney, and somebody else. So we've got to figure out a way. You want to look for true incrementality around client campaigns to ensure that they're engaging with audiences and ways that are positive. We've got to make sure that we can see across the entire ecosystem, make sure that that identity travels across partners. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges right now is we don't want to optimize because consumers aren't watching just one channel, one media offering from anybody. They're watching a smorgasbord from everyone. So we've got to figure that out. And OpenAP is one of the ways in which we're doing more and more of that at GroupM.
I was just going to say that's the premise of OpenAP, but I hear you, and I think this is the conundrum, right? I've entered back into the land of TV after spending a decade in either first-party data richness and streaming and the like, and early days Hulu, when Hulu was a PC-only offering, and that data allowed a couple of things. It has superpowers beyond just saying, we know what they're watching. It goes back to making recommendations on how you buy our offering, which is Matt, what you're saying is that we understand that every household, in any given household, what they're watching, what's number one, who won the night last night is going to be very different. And it doesn't cume the way it once did, right? Mm-hmm. And so our ability to say things like, you want to reach her, and you want to reach her by buying, I don't know, I'm going to go on a broadcaster and say The Bachelorette, right? But really, she's watching Bachelorette, Family Guy, a whole lot of Gilmore Girls, a little bit of Alf because it was just ingested and whatever's on Netflix and the like, right? And at the end of the day, you don't judge her. You just want to make sure that your brand is in front of her. But when you start sharing all the data, then it comes back to what is our special sauce? What's our proprietary sort of like richness that we bring to the table? And I think that's the balance of I look at you, John, the beauty of digital, the beauty of what is still content and linear, and really converge those, not only like the practice of the utility of enabling it, but also the knowledge and the thinking. And again, the sweet, it's a science and an art, right? On how you want to engage people. And I think right now, this is the group that's been really at the forefront trying to figure out what is that right balance overall. But OpenAP it's pushing us along on the TV side for sure.
We know that data is valuable. Data is monetizable. It's money. So is it a sense that there's a culture of sort of hoarding data, that people don't want to share data because it's valuable, but is there a sort of a mindset that needs to change? And if that was more shared widely, that it would facilitate more things like OpenAP.
I don't think we know how it's all going to shake out in the end, but certainly things like OpenAP, to be simple, right, allow for planning, right, against parts of the TV and video ecosystem, right, in a uniform way across, cross publisher is sort of this magic word. The stickier issue of, hey, now I'm going to start taking data on like what my consumers watch, right? Like this sort of very, not just proprietary information, but information that, is consumer data, right? And so the idea of just sort of openly sharing that stuff into the ecosystem is tricky. I'm not in a position to share everything I know about consumers with someone like OpenAP. That's where, not to use all these buzzwords, but that is where these sort of collaboration spaces, these clean rooms, right? And it's not just us that are talking about these things that allow, the buy side, for example, to have a sort of linkage between their data and ours, and a kind of common insight into that data and access to those insights without us actually physically moving that data. Like days of me going to like the InfoSec and privacy people at a place like NBCU and tell them I'm going to package up our data, our data on what people are watching, and I'm going to ship them over to Matt and the and the agency folks. I mean, that's just not going to happen, right? I mean, it's just a broad, but really kind of concrete statement. It's not going to happen. So there are these sort of useful kind of common entities like OpenAP, right? And I think that's a really good one. And I think there's also this sort of data collaboration model that we're all going to have to figure out. And it's not going to be as easy as programmatic display was 10 years ago. It's just, it's not going to happen. Right?
I think that's what's exciting, John. Is we're at this crossroads of content and audience and sort of threading that needle on bringing value back to the TV ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. I think Mark touched on it, right? If we can win money back from some of the social platforms, because we now have that digital addressability, accountability to really a television video viewing experience, that's what I really think it's exciting. And we're talking a lot about data, but for me, it really comes down to enablement, right? What do Matt's clients need to unlock? What is the data work and collection that they've done on their side? And how am I continuing to attract that audience via content, get them to spend time with Fox in our walls, in our apps, and then enable the matching to take place where, again, I've got my connection with my audience. I know who they are, but it really matters more what Matt's brand thinks of them or knows about them, and how are we enabling it, targeting it, measuring it, and obviously proving the performance out of television video ecosystem in totality, right? So I love that OpenAP stands for that. We're going to compete for eyeballs by having great content, great sports rights. And the more that we can enable what it is the clients need to do and how they need to see the performance of their investment back out. I mean, that's the name of the game for us at Fox, and what I think we're looking to really accomplish next year.
There's another open standard. A lot of the data we're talking about is actually kind of already available. The other open standard is OpenRTB. We get bits 250,000 times a second. So we see every second, we see 250,000 different households or devices, or not necessarily the exact show they're watching, but certainly the network. And that's just happening right now with Mountain, with Trade Desk, with anyone participating in the auction. So I think the data is valuable, but as the industry continues to go more programmatic, to the extent it goes more programmatic, I mean, it's just kind of inherent that you're going to see that stream. You know, the real superpower of television, and this speaks to what Kristen said earlier, that YouTube has more viewing hours, and I watch YouTube a lot. But the only thing I do where I am like really dedicated to the experience is being told a story on television or in a movie theater.
One of the things that we have seen in research we've done recently is on the notion of like telling great stories, right? It's like that in and of itself is 4 times more important to viewers than any sort of like predictability in terms of scheduling or cadence or structure. It's all about just whether it resonates or not. And it's what's capturing the hearts and minds of people. We all have different definitions, right, of what moves us and what content connects with us. And at the end of the day, where I've come to is, you know, and I grew up in a different era too, but like video is video. And the definition of compelling video is what captures the hearts and minds of a consumer. Right?
Is there anything that you see in the kind of the state of the art in terms of selling inventory that is, you know, now spread across seemingly infinitesimal platforms? Is that anything at all that I know that in the past that had been an area that Google had really been focused on?
Yeah, I mean, we continue to be focused on YouTube Select and our auction business. They're both incredibly important to us. We're also focused on expanding formats, right? Shorts is something that launched in India in 2020. A few short years later, we have incredible adoption of that platform with 1.5 billion logged in users a month, actively watching 30 billion views a day, right? So I think from a YouTube perspective, for consumers to have content in whatever form is going to connect with them most, short, long, audio, podcast, music, etc. And then also similarly for advertisers, right? So how do we put structures that are going to be attractive for our buying partners and for our marketers, like to really bring their brands to life on the platform? And I'll say that's something that's hugely important to us and the work that we're doing with partners to really bring their brands to life authentically through the lens of this platform is really exciting.
Tubi has recently come into the Fox organization. What has that impact of bringing in very big channel business? What has that been for you demographically? And what has that meant for you from a sales perspective?
Absolutely. Like we touched on at the top, I think it was the perfect timing from an industry standpoint of audience consumption and fragmentation. hard part is COVID and not being in the same building with those folks for 2 years. But now we've got that team camaraderie, bringing everybody together. Certainly the younger, more diverse audience there that you would expect. And again, I think the absolute right time to begin building out our linear complement. I think you've seen in the last year and a half us really attempting to Foxify that platform, launching our local news channels, Fox Weather. The World Cup will be streaming on Tubi in just under 30 days. So again, I think continuing to populate that with great content, the goal there, right? Get audiences in, super serve them, make it very sticky, retain them, get them to stay and come back. So it's been really fun to work with that team, and now going to market together with what we call One Fox. So again, you talk about this fragmentation. We're talking about the scale that platforms deliver in totality. What's great is the broadcast programmers with the digital streaming elements have that scale. We just need to be smarter about how we take it to market, how we make agencies and buyers and Matt's life easier. And really what we stood up about 2 weeks ago with Magnite, with One Fox Programmatic and launching the GroupM premium private marketplace there, I think signals all of that. Is we want to make it easier to transact. We want to help navigate some of this fragmentation and really bring together our assets that, again, it's up to the user and the audience at the end of the day of how they're going to consume this content. And we've got to really package it, streamline the way we sell it and take it to market. So that's really top of mind for us this year as we, think about programming, think about going to sell it, and doing more together in that fashion.
John, there was news just this morning, an interesting deal between Peacock and Hallmark Media. You're going to bring some of that Hallmark pumpkin spice and feel good content to Peacock through a really interesting deal. Can you talk about what that has meant to the overall NBCUniversal advertising business?
In simple terms, Peacock is the center of the universe, really, right? From our advertising strategy and in many ways, our content distribution strategy sort of in general. And so, to us, there obviously are two flavors of the service, the SVOD and the AVOD, but AVOD being, the sort of preponderance of the viewership. AVOD isn't a pivot, for us, where we sort of had a subscription business and said, hey, we sort of need to shore this up. Let's open up an advertising business. It started, right, as an ad-supported vehicle. And, so it really sits in the center. And so now we do take a digital first. It's hard to generalize these things, right? Because there are lots of different clients with different needs. But we do take a digital first or streaming first, approach with our understanding of audiences, our ability to, activate and measure on our advertisers' audiences, and to be able to do that seamlessly cross-platform, right? And sort of blend in a way, sort of feather in and blend in the linear, sort of products that obviously are still huge in terms of scale for us, right? Smaller in terms of the future growth. I mean, that's not a big trade secret, right? That's the reality of the industry, obviously. So that's sort of the cornerstone, right? Is the sort of data-driven capabilities, the quality of the content that can be consumed on Peacock, and everything else, sort of builds around that. Without Peacock, right, that would have no center of gravity to us, right? It would just be this sort of collage of different distribution points. Peacock is really the anchor.
As recent as 2 years ago, even we, our planners and then our buying teams would be thinking about, all right, let's get the linear money down, and then we'll backfill supply needs through connected TV and streaming. And what you're seeing, especially, depending on the category of advertiser, is very often they're thinking about streaming first and then filling in some of the spaces around linear. So there is a sea change, and it hasn't happened for every category, but many categories and planning teams are thinking and sort of going to market this way. So it's a very different market than it was 3 years ago, for sure.
Do you feel like that there's a feeling of that it's still sort of a zero sum? If there's more money going to broadcast, then it's got to be coming out of cable, or cable is getting more money. In a world of like infinite inventory, it feels like that there is that game is a little different.
I wouldn't say there's infinite premium video inventory. And I've got to live my standards may be a little bit higher than my kids, for sure.
That's true.
But there is a shift, though, in terms of how we're evaluating connected TV and streamers. And we welcome with open arms, ad-supported launches by both Disney Plus and by Netflix. It's good for the marketplace. The reality is this will be the, I don't know, 7th, 8th, 9th year in a row where traditional Nielsen ratings are down, and down significantly. The audiences are getting older in traditional linear. Great for pharma, but not a lot of other categories are trying to, reach really older demographics. So it's been smart by NBC to launch Peacock, and for Fox to buy Tubi, and for Warner Brothers Discovery to have Discovery Plus and HBO Max. I mean, these are really smart media moves, and if they hadn't made them, their revenue would be going down, and it would be a zero-sum game from one platform or one traditional media marketplace to another.
You are also in the business of threading. You've got a very big linear business. You've got a growing AVOD business, a very prominent, player in the SVOD world. Can you talk about how the changing mindset and the way you are crafting your media mix for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to say it out loud, OMG, Nielsen's not doing any of us any freaking favors here, right? Like they just haven't. And I say that because here at the end of the day, they are panel based, and panel is so good at what it does, but it is not good when it comes to actual fragmented granular viewing across an entire portfolio of supply. And so we've been very strategic and rigorous in our approach around how we're going to think about counting our audiences full stop across our portfolio.
Counting those House of the Dragon viewers.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, it goes back to, we still think there's a ton of viewing that's not being captured in our linear supply. But yes, to everybody's point, it's not necessarily the growth engine. But we still have a responsibility to capture that viewing. And then we have to stitch it to where else they're viewing across any other platform, right? And we have to think about the ad load and the frequency and the incrementality there. And ultimately, it's something we haven't really talked about here. And I'm quite passionate about the counting side of the house, and we will get it right in the sense that we'll make it better and capture those impressions and extract as much value as we can and be prescriptive about the media mix. But it goes back to, what are you actually trying to do? Efficacy. It's actually thinking about, where are you on the funnel and what is the right media mix in order for us to reach a lot of people, check that box, get a little targeted with a little DDL in there, right? Addressable potentially. And then ultimately using that first party data to get at conversion. It's going to be the Matts of the world who are going to say, you know what, your media mix is punching above its weight. It's on us to qualify the value of our exposure, regardless of if it's in our house where it's beautiful, long form, episodic storytelling that pulls at the hearts and all the things, or whether you're learning on other platforms, right? It's all going to be where it needs to be. And that's the street fight that, sellers have. But for us, it's going back to, how do we demonstrate and derive the value based on what we're listening to and partnering when it comes to the investments that advertisers are making across our house. In TV, and I will say this, and then I'll stop, we always just check that box for reach, and we can get more nuanced than that. And when I say media mix internally, people are like, you mean across the cable bundle? I'm like, no. That's the anchor. Okay. It's everything else. And our streaming is the cherry on top. That's the future of our business. It still has to scale, but it's got the ability to actually bring younger, more diverse, incremental audiences. You want that Venn diagram? That's where they exist. They're not watching the other stuff, right?
What I'm hearing from this conversation is that the business of advertising, the business of advertising and marketing solutions, that is in and of itself becoming a storytelling business, in the sense you need to tell, okay, this is what happened after your impression. It feels to me like you really are now invested in the business of telling those outcomes, of tracking your viewer and tracking, their behavior, or what they clicked on and what they didn't. I would imagine that that's a very different skill set that you have to hone within your teams, is almost like detective work.
Cynthia, what I'll say to that is, yes, absolutely. We need to prove, right, the full funnel all the way through conversion and tell that story. But I think one of the things that makes TV so magical over the arc of time, right, is that it is about culture, right? And I think when I talk to clients, and I'll tell a story of last week was just with the CMO of McDonald's, and that's a brand, they've really leaned in heavily to be tied into pop culture right now. And we spent a lot of time with their marketing organization to try it obviously starts with leveraging data and insight, like about where consumers are. We're working with them right now on a McRib campaign, which is, a fun brand that they have in their portfolio. And it's not just about finding the consumer, but also what are they watching so that they can surprise and delight consumers in the moment. And I think our industry has gotten so far on the data measurement, how do we pull someone all the way through conversion, that part of what makes marketing and advertising media exciting is the ability to surprise and delight our consumers and actually capture into the cultural zeitgeist, right? It's no more about the brand just dictating everything in the advertisement. It's about turning the pen over to trusted creators who can tell their brand story in kind of amazing ways. I just caution us as an industry to not lean too far one way or the other, because engaging the hearts and minds of consumers is as important as pulling them, down the funnel. And we need to do both of those and be cognizant.
Completely agree with that. And obviously, Maximum Effort is a division of Mountain. So Ryan Reynolds, George Dewey are part of Mountain and completely believe in culturally relevant ads. They coined the frame fast advertising. So you can do both, to have Ryan creating ads for some of our customers personally, while at the same time having data all the way through conversion. I think it's doable. Premium content is ultimately going to be any episodic content for which you have the richest amount of data attached to it. That's what people are going to pay the most for.
The problem is TV has just been so far away from the cash register, right? For so long. There's just this big sort of swing, which I think is a good one. I mean, NBCU right now, we're making a very hard push into, look, we have an ID, in our database associated with all the ads that got served, right? By the ad server. It sounds like digital, right? And we need to start using that sort of clean data set to make that available to packaged goods, CPG companies that want to work with, IRI or whoever their trusted partner is, to count the sales of those things. We need to sort of bring, or automotive or whatever it is. So we're making a big push into not just counting the impressions, but count the impressions that led to the cash register. And we want to get credit for those things. And we don't want there to be a question mark around why was the price high, right? When this was a super targeted ad, I know exactly what impact it had on my business, and it was next to premium content. People should be happy, right? Hopefully Matt and all of his clients will be happy to pay that higher, CPM on fewer ads. That's the name of the game here. So we're pushing very, very hard into attribution, performance lift, like all those capabilities, because TV's sort of been in the back room for too long on that.
Yeah, I think
Just don't get crazy with your CPMs, any of you, please.
Or we can prove the higher they get. I'm sure. I don't.
Now we're getting that sense of the table. Well, I think this has been a really edifying conversation. And for those watching, now you know why we are all, when we go to a website, now you know why we're all having to click, yes, I accept these cookies. Yes, the drama of first party data. But seriously, it was a great conversation among people who know their stuff because they're in the trenches. And we're so grateful for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.